God dwells in you.
And also in you.
Let us pray. Holy and loving God, giver of all good gifts, thank you for this spectacular day that is coming to an end right now. And as we watch the sun set and our eyes behold the vesper light, be present with us in new ways. Be present with us in passion. Help us to speak clearly and listen deeply. Help us to hear your still small voice in our hearts, in the spaces between words, and on the lips of one another. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Well, first of all, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for jumping on at 6 o'clock on a Tuesday evening. We're going to just keep doing these. See more folks are coming on. Thank you so much for being here. Because we want to give everyone a chance to hear a little bit from All Saints leadership, but mostly also a lot of this is just going to be turned over to you, and it's a chance for you to say anything that you feel like we need to hear. We want to hear from you and how you're doing. We're emerging from this pandemic into a new world that we're going to make together, and we're emerging from it at our own paces. And that means that there's some of you that we're seeing on Sunday mornings in person at All Saints Church, and there's some of you that are only seeing us because you're still where you are. And it really has given George's words, whoever you are and wherever you find yourself on your journey of faith, a meaning that at least I'd never thought of before. And we do want to give everyone a chance at least once a month to come together and just kind of hear from you and see what's on your mind. And every time we do this, we start off with an update on something. And last month, Tony Jackson was with us, and he talked to us about the strategic direction process that we're going through. And I really hope you had an opportunity to fill out the survey for that. That actually closed up last night. We got incredible data from that. Now we get to parse through all of it. And just thank you to so many of you who took the time to fill that out, and we'll be giving you updates on that. What we wanted to start off with tonight is, and I'm grateful to be joined by Julianne Hines, who is your Junior Warden, and Terry Knowles, who is your Director of Giving and Stewardship, to give you an update on the 2022 budget. And the last week at this time, on Tuesday evening, your vestry passed a draft budget, and that's a really important word, a draft budget for 2022. This really helps us do some planning for the next year. And it's not a final budget. As you're going to see in this presentation, we still have some work to do on this. And we wanted to let you know where we are. The final budget will be passed by the vestry in January. And so we will begin the new year with a final budget. But I'm going to share my screen and just fairly quickly walk you through some things. And we're going to start with something that we call planning assumptions. This is something that when we were going through pandemic last year and planning for the budget for 2021, and frankly, we realized later it's something we should probably do every year, but we went into that process knowing that 2021 was going to be a year very much unlike the years previous. And we needed to be aware of what assumptions we were going to be making about that year so that we could budget not for something that wasn't going to exist that we'd had in the past, but the best we can budget for the world that we were going to be living in. As we started this budget process this year, we quickly realized we needed to do the same thing, that we realized that 2022 wasn't going to be this sort of, oh, we're magically out of pandemic and everything is back to normal. And in fact, part of what you're going to see is our first planning assumption is that we're probably not going to go back to the way things were. And that's important. This assumption, and we got together with the vestry and the staff, and we said, what assumptions do we want to make, not for the future ad infinitum, but for 2022 that we can plan around. And the first assumption is we're not going to go back to the way things were. And that's a recognition that this pandemic has fundamentally changed the way that we go about things and the way we view things. And it's changed a lot of things that we're just beginning to understand. So that was the first planning assumption. The next several are that most people will continue to be adversely affected by the economy. And the second one may seem to be a strange one after that one, which is that giving income will stay stable or even rise slightly. And Terry can answer some questions about this later. I think a big part of our ability to make that planning assumption, it is a big part. It's you. Um, this congregation has been incredibly generous and reaching down and digging deep during a hard time of this pandemic. And you have made it clear that supporting All Saints Church is a priority for you, and we're deeply grateful. And we heard a lot from you during the last year of how grateful you were for how All Saints has made it through the pandemic. I got to tell you, I talked to a lot of colleagues around church. There's a lot of churches that are really worried whether they're going to close or not. That the giving hit has been huge because of the pandemic. We really have not suffered that. We're certainly not worrying about closing. Um, Really, you all have stepped up in ways that are just nothing short of inspirational and moving. And so, we're able to say that we believe this year giving income will stay stable or even rise slightly. Building income is a different story. Building income will continue to lag as the pandemic continues. And we'll say more about that in a minute. More planning assumptions. And we're seeing some of these already. First, people will be slow returning physically to church. New people will come, and some people won't come back. We've had people, you get in the habit of coming to church, and then for 18 months, you don't do it and you don't come back. Um, Hybrid models must be developed for everything, and I think we can say that that's part of us being on a Zoom town hall meeting right now. Um, we're all over the map of how we are personally. We're afraid, grieving, and wounded, and we're also longing to sing, dance, and celebrate. And we need to just live all over that spectrum and hold those things in tension and realize that sometimes the difference between feeling afraid, grieving, and wounded and longing to sing, dance, and celebrate can be 5 minutes. And so we just need to create a space where all of that is okay and all of that is embraced. And that's this next part. Healing and learning how to reconnect are going to have to be priorities. We are hopeful about our future. We will need to continue to innovate to thrive. I'm really proud of how we've innovated in the last year, and we need to keep doing that. And then this last piece is crucial, which is staff is working at or beyond capacity. And everyone's capacity is diminished. I read an article that talked about the double marathon, that how as we are coming out of COVID, and we're not there yet, that it's like we're finishing a marathon and yet we're starting a second marathon right on top of it, which is adjusting to this new world post-COVID. And by the way, not most of us didn't train for one marathon and we're running two, so everyone's capacity is diminished. Some wider world assumptions is that political, social, and theological divisions are going to continue to widen. And that our focus on dismantling white supremacy and becoming anti-racist, it needs to actually not just be a 2021, 2022 thing. We need to build this in ways that are going to be long-term. And you heard us last year, and when the vestry presented the budget, talking about we really believe that this is the work of our generation of the church, is dismantling white supremacy and becoming actively anti-racist. So those are some of the planning assumptions we made. Here's some of the assumptions that we made going into this budget. That we said this budget needs to reflect these things. First of all, is that prioritizing the reinstatement of cost of living allowances for the staff. This draft for budget reflects a 4% cost of living allowance, a 4% cost of living increase. For quite a few years, staff were given a 3% cost of living increase. And then in 2020, that was shrunk to a 2%. And then last year, because of the pandemic, staff didn't get a cost of living increase at all. And so we recognize that there's some reparative work to do, which is why we really feel strongly about this 4% cost of living allowance for staff. We talked about building income going down. That's a big hit. We used to get $250,000 a year for our parking lot. We're really only able to estimate 125,000 for next year. We are hopeful that that income will come back fully. And then this budget represents full funding for a fourth clergy position for 2022. We've been talking about that for a long time. We need a third associate rector position. This church really cannot function the way it needs to function with just 3 full-time clergy. And then we have Susan Russell as an assisting priest at 40%. We really need that fourth clergy, and we need someone who is going to really help focus us on that work of racial justice. Last year we had a new position called Director of Connection and Care. It started out as half-time. In mid-year, we realized that position really needs to be full-time. Thomas Diaz has done a wonderful job with that. This draft budget keeps that as full-time. We have 6 administrative assistant positions, which is more than we have now, but not as many as we used to have. And the need for support staff, particularly because we're going to do things like defer filling the Director of Faith and Action position until 2023. The need for support staff is important. The Director of Faith and Action, that's our new working title for the position that Juliana Serrano used to hold, which was the Senior Associate for Peace and Justice and Director of the Office of Creative Connections. So we decided to shorten that a little bit just as a working title. And I'm really working a lot with Loren Young and with the Peace and Justice Vestry Committee. Loren, if you're out there anywhere, you're doing such an amazing job. And she and I meet regularly, and I'm going to be meeting with the Peace and Justice Vestry Committee next month. And we want to make sure that our peace and justice ministries continue to thrive. And we're going to spend this year, particularly because the fourth clergy person is going to be working a lot with peace and justice. We want to bring them on, have the Peace and Justice Vestry Committee go through our strategic direction process. We don't want to fill that position until we really have a sense of, we know what it used to be, of what it really can be and needs to be for the future. This new budget, this draft budget, creates a full-time facilities program manager position. The need for this position predates me. When I got here, there was someone I've actually never met, but I hear wonderful things about her, Adriana, who had left that position. Veronica Flores wonderfully filled it. It was supposed to be temporary for her for several years. And then she was unable to do it. And then Gloria Lopez, who we should just make a statue of somewhere. Gloria, we said, can you step in for a little bit and do this job while we fill this position? And then COVID happened, and Gloria's been doing it for 2 years. This is something that is long needed, and we need to hire that for this year. And then we've added a half-time human resources position, Samantha Kramer, who is wonderful. And there's so many things that we were lacking in HR and we needed to change. That Samantha is coming in and really helping us with. And that is just so much value added for us. And then we have outsourced for 1 year all of our finance operations, accounting and everything like that to this organization that we talked about called MissionWell. And MissionWell, this is what they do. They do sort of all the back office accounting for churches and nonprofits. It is a savings of money for us, and they're also really updating our systems and our processes in wonderful ways. Here's the process we went through. We started off really in April and May, and the staff drafted budgets, and we started estimating income and expense as closely as possible, really looking at what are our fixed costs. Like we know we have to pay the electric bill and things like that. Terry did a lot of wonderful work and came up with a draft income budget that includes that goal that you've heard her talk about of $3.3 million in pledges for 2022. The Finance Committee then reviewed and endorsed a draft budget. There were actually sort of several cycles of going through staff with that. And then on October 19th, the vestry approved the draft budget. This draft budget currently does have a deficit. We're going to get to that in a little bit. For some perspective, last year's did too. Last year's had a deficit of $121,000. By the time we adopted the full budget, the regular budget, the official budget, that had been balanced. And that is the intention this year, is to have a balanced budget in 2022. The final budget will be presented to vestry for approval at the January meeting. We also need to talk a little bit about the PPP funds. If you remember, PPP was this program called the Paycheck Protection Program. And it was a government program that allowed small businesses, and we qualify as a small business, to get a loan from the government to keep people employed. And we did that. And one of the things that we guaranteed at the beginning of the pandemic, and this was way back in March of 2020, is we said, if you are expecting income from All Saints Church in this year, we're guaranteeing your income. And we actually didn't, at the time, we weren't quite sure how we were going to do that. And so we received this money um, from the federal government. It didn't officially hit the books for us until this year because we really wanted to say, can we, through the generosity of our congregation, can we, still, meet our commitments? Um, this year, that money hit the books because, thanks to Mission Well, frankly, they filled out all the reams of paperwork, and the loan was forgiven, and these funds are available. So here's how that money is being used. $205,000 is going to be used to reimburse quasi endowment. Now these are I can let someone these are funds that we can draw on for capital expenses and then other expenses. We borrowed from this fund to cover the sabbatical, severance, and extended healthcare costs for employees whose positions were terminated in September. And severance that we offered. We went to our employees whose positions were terminated, and we continued to offer them healthcare for at least half of 2021 because we did not want to, especially this was before everyone was vaccinated who is over 12. We didn't want people to lose medical care in the middle of a pandemic. And so this goes to reimburse those costs. About 311,000 of it is left, and 2/3 of that you'll see that's in this budget. And we talked about using them as targeted investments in areas that are specifically about congregational health. What do we need to return strong, and also congregational growth? And so this money is a targeted investment to fully reinstate the adult choir program and staff, children and youth choir program, and the children and youth ministry program. Because the music programs of this congregation and the youth programs are so important to community and they're important to healing. We have some increases in what we call our incorporation ministries. Latino Hispanic ministry, African American ministry, and Chinese ministry, both because our vision and our dream that we believe God has for us is to become this beloved community of so many hues, and also because as we look around in our neighborhood is changing, and we need to change with it. And then also we are just completing a communications audit. We're awaiting for the report on that, and we want to have funds set aside so that we can actually respond to the results of that audit. That leaves $102,000 that's available to be used sort of TBA in a way that is yet to be determined. That would have to be approved both by Finance Committee and Vestry. So the draft budget that we have, you've sort of seen, given you sort of by title what's in it. Income from all sources in the draft budget is $4.579 million. Expenses, $4.845 million. Well, that's more, and that means we have a deficit of $163,000. And that's kind of the work that we have to do between now and January, is we have to find a way to close that gap. And actually, there's two levers to push. There's the income lever. There's having more income than we're planning on, or there's cutting expenses. And so that's some of the work that your vestry is going to be working on for the next couple months. Just some closing notes on this. This is a draft budget. It still requires our work to close the $163,000 gap. You sort of say, well, what's the biggest driver of this? And a huge driver of this, in addition, we have that 4% cost of living, which really is a justice issue. We have to remember that when you don't allow cost of living increases, people are getting de facto salary cuts. And so this really it's not actually giving people a raise so much as it really is trying to keep up with inflation. The other thing is we are estimating, and this is what we've been told to do, 10 to 11% increase in health benefit expenses. Our single biggest line item by far is personnel. And what is happening now is the insurance companies are trying to recoup their losses from the pandemic, and rates are going way up. And so that's a huge hit in fixed costs. Said including the COLA for staff is critically important. 4% is our aspirational goal. We must make that giving goal of $3.3 million in pledges. That $163,000 gap is with us making that goal. Would love it if we could exceed that goal, and we absolutely have to make that goal because we cannot increase that gap. The gap's going to be challenging enough to close. And so that piece is about you. Your generosity is incredibly significant. to the financial health and sustainability of this church. If you have pledged already, and many of you have, thank you so much. It is incredibly important. And if you haven't pledged already, please, please do. And again, you hear me say the same thing every year, which is pray about it and have conversations with the people that you make decisions about money if they're already for you. And then please pledge what God puts on your heart. And what I always like to say is, pledge in a way that makes you just a little bit nervous. Because I got to tell you, I find when I do that, it ends up making me feel really, really great. And we need to come through this pandemic strong. And so just, deeply grateful to all of your support. So I'm going to invite Terry and Julianne to turn their cameras on. I see we have some new people who've jumped in. And I want to pause there and see, Julianne and Terry, do you have anything to add to that?
Mike, I'd like to point out that on the slide where you do revenue and expenses, the math doesn't work, and that is because what we didn't talk about were the offsets. That
Yes.
There is about $102,000 in income that offsets certain expenses in the budget. So the math does work, it just didn't work quite there. So just in case there was somebody out there with a calculator.
Good, that's actually really good. Thank you very much. That's important. Yeah, and offsets are like, if you have registration fees for, for something. And so we have to budget an expense, we also budget income, and they balance out. They offset. So Julianne, anything to add?
Not really. I think you covered everything. The only thing I would just say is it's been really inspiring how hard members of your vestry and your finance committee and the staff have really been working to get us to this point. And just historically, other than last year, this is really the earliest we've been having these kind of conversations in quite some time. Although, we sort of changed the way we do things last year. So we're more in keeping with that and in that tradition.
So go ahead.
Yeah, and so just, we're continuing to work hard, continuing to ask the vestry to really look through the budget and plan and dream and think about how we're going to close that gap at the end of the year. So still working on it.
Sounds good. So that's really what we have. And you can either use the chat or the Q&A feature. We'd love to hear from you. So what questions do you have? What comments? What thoughts? Rebuttals? Anything? Don't make us fill time.
I might put a little context maybe around the pledge number. Last year, as I'm sure everyone absolutely remembers, because it was such thrilling data, our goal for the pledge campaign was $3 million. And when all was said and done, that was 3.108 in pledges. So we did exceed our goal, thanks to so many of you. This is a little bump, as you can plainly see. And while pledge income has been trending sort of slowly down over the last 5, 6, 7 years or so, it peaked really in 2010 in recent history. Indicators are that we can hope for and expect just a little bit more this year than last year. So it's a little bit of a stretch, but as Mike said, we think we can do it, that you can do it. You are already stepping up marvelously. So many people have increased, and it's just remarkable, and we're so grateful. And we have $2 million yet to raise. So we're not done by any stretch, but this community has been remarkably generous, and there's just no reason to think that it won't continue to be. So we hope that you will step up as soon as you can. But as he also said, it's one of the moving pieces as we try to close the gap on the budget that we'll have to look at. So we'll be watching how we're doing and how it's trending.
Yeah. So Marcia asks a really good question. What do we do when the PPP money is used up? So the purpose of the PPP money was for small businesses to be able to continue to not just survive, but thrive and to make it through the pandemic. And so we're using the PPP money for the purposes for which it was given, which is to help us continue not just to survive, but to thrive. And that's why we talked about it in terms of targeted investment, not just using it to plug a budget hole, and so we'll figure it out later. We used it in specific areas that we think this is what we need to come back strong and not just survive, but thrive. And so the idea is that this income needs to be replaced in 2023, and that the investment that we're making with it gives us the best chance to have that income be replaced in 2023. And again, we're also we're working on other income sources. We're certainly hoping that the courthouse comes back and attendance in court and all that comes back in a way that will increase our parking lot income. But one of the things that we've recognized is that we have some potentially underutilized streams of income at All Saints Church. One of them is weddings. And so we are looking at how do we, increase our visibility as a wedding destination. And another thing is in TV and film shoots. And this is something that Veronica Flores has been done an amazing work with. We have gone and she found a company that has done and has like literally shot every square inch of All Saints Church, taken 3D photos of. And sometime soon, you're going to be able to go to our website and take a 3D tour of the entire campus. And if you're a film scout, what you're going to be able to do is measure things, and there's going to be notes and things. And this is actually the new industry standard because the film industry is cutting back on their scouting departments because they need to save money too. And they're looking first at locations that have this. And then if they think that you have what they need, then they send a scout to your location. We have a really good team that is working on increasing this business. And so we really think that by 2023, as that industry comes back, we're going to be able to increase our income there. Another thing that we're looking at is a partnership. The Central Library has shut down for 7 years. And that's because of it needs seismic retrofitting, and it's on the National Registry of Historic Places. So that will take time. And there's programs there that are funded by the city that specifically serve this neighborhood, so they can't just be relocated to another branch. And so we're starting conversations with the library about, are there programs that could be relocated to All Saints during the week? And that would be a win-win. That would be us. A lot of them are programs that benefit members of our community who are unhoused. So it would be us fulfilling our mission, and it would potentially be a funding stream too, because that funding that was going to the library would then, at least a portion of it, would come to us. So that's some of what that's some of the things that we're looking on, and we're trying to look at this from every possible angle. Julianne and Terry, anything else to add with that?
I would say the only other, along the same lines, we having conversations with other partners that we do work with, like Romans, and, seeing if we can build in when they host, when they're asking us to host events for them, right. They can, if they know ahead of time that we need them to cover the cost for our staff to keep the facility right. open, then they can build that into their ticket prices. So just trying to really be creative and work yeah. with the partners we have and attract new partners.
And so they're a great partner with us. Am I frozen? Did you hear me say that?
You are freezing up yeah. every once in a while and then coming back.
Sorry about that. Yeah. So we have on Monday we have Blair Amani, who is amazing Buddhist queer young activist. She's going to be in conversation with Andre Henry about her book. That's a ticketed event. And then a week from Thursday, Greg Boyle is going to be with us in the nave. And so that's always an amazing evening. And that's good. And, that's also, in addition to being a community service, that's income for us. A couple more. Bonnie says, I don't believe I've heard the term incorporation ministries before. What are they? Are they part of connection and care work? How are they currently working, and or how are they envisioned to work? I think the term came from that's something that someone who made a budget some year decided to call that category. And it's sort of where new members and things like that come. It's where historically Latino Hispanic ministry has come under incorporation ministries. And this year, what we're doing is through the targeted investment of PPP funds, we've recognized that we need to be able to fund specific outreach to other communities that are not part of the dominant white culture of All Saints Church, and that's specifically the African American community and the Chinese community. And so we have, Alfredo has continued to gather. We have a part of what has happened is that a portion of our community has decided that the 1 p.m. service was no longer really meeting the needs of frankly, anyone. And the ceiling for its growth had really been achieved. And they are going to be looking at building community and potentially starting another Spanish-speaking liturgy at a different time. 1 p.m., there were just so many people who were working or had family obligations at that time, and they need to have money to do that. We have a team that is working on not just Chinese ministry, but outreach to all the different Asian communities. The diocese before the pandemic offered some really great day-long events that were cultural immersion events into different Asian cultures. And we had a team that went to those, and we were actually planning our first big celebration of all the Asian cultures at All Saints Church when the pandemic hit. That was supposed to happen last April, and it never happened. This gives them money for that. It also gives us a chance to do partnerships with groups like The Gathering, which is the primary sort of parachurch diocesan ministry with the Asian American and Pacific Islander community. They're not necessarily part of the connection and care work. That's different. I can see that, and but they're also in the sense that they are, because all these things are related. And so I hope that answers that question. Terry or Julianne, anything? Okay, and then I froze again.
You're back.
So there I am. I know. So maybe there needs to be a budget line item for rectory internet. So, here's one for you, Terry. Floor says, I haven't made my pledge for 2022. Can I do it by next month?
I didn't ask Floor to ask that question, but the answer is yes, absolutely. Hi, Floor. Yes, you can make your pledge with that dreaded donate button that I talk relentlessly about. There are pledge cards around the church. Just email me or call me. Absolutely, you can do that in the next month. We will try to, I will be sorry I said this, we'll try to wrap the campaign up by, early December, but that'll never happen, right? So we're ready to take your pledge whenever you are ready to make it. And I saw another question in the chat about Amazon Smile, and yes, All Saints Church is enrolled in Amazon Smile. So go for it. Shop like mad on Amazon.
Shop like mad, and we get a piece of that. So I will click answer live on that. Catherine says, I can't believe that All Saints functions on just a $5 million annual budget. Well done. Are there significant activities you'd like to grow into that the church can't undertake due to limited funding? Julianne, what, I'd like to sort of kick that. I mean, God, I could think of a lot of stuff.
It's always.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. The things that come to mind, sort of immediately for me, really is as we, knock on wood, bring on the fourth priest and give that person time to sort of connect with the community and really observe and learn the community, and then start making plans. For some of the things we've talked about, the vestry has talked a lot about that racial justice is really the primary work that we as a church need to be focused on and living into those values. And so I think there are all sorts of things that can be dreamed. We're doing work with CCEJ right now with the Racial Justice Advisory Board and the staff and the vestry, and learning and growing. And what will come after sort of 6 months of study on that will come a planning period. And so I would imagine that there are things that we're going to be wanting to look at to grow into over the next couple of years. And so certainly I think there are a lot of, and I know, if you talk to the staff, there's all kinds of creative stuff that we would really be wanting to think about with our music programs and just through learning. And I think there's a lot that we could really grow into. Certainly, I'm going to say when the money comes, we will have very thought out ideas of how to use it.
Yeah. I mean, if you're talking to sort of aspirational, I would dearly love to offer family medical insurance to all of our staff. You know, we're not able to, we offer medical insurance, but not family medical to all our staff. I would love to do that. You know, I was going to say, obviously, I mean, it's obvious to me, like we need national health care in this country, I would say. And I just, it makes me sick that so many people are living, you know, without healthcare or struggling for that. And then that's the other thing, which is that we pay our lowest wage workers well. I'd like to pay them better, and that's something that I would really wish we could do. And I think that's so that's sort of significant. And then I say activities that I would love to, like, if you know, if we all of a sudden had $1 million more a year, that's something I would love to work on. Is making sure everyone in family medical and giving our lowest wage workers some more money. Marshall Rutter says, this is a great town hall. It makes the confusing budgetary matters much clearer to me. So, well, thank you, Marshall. I appreciate that. Grateful for that. And then Marshall follows up with a question. Is anything being done to audit the usage of the parking lot? I believe that courthouse usage is on the rise. And this is something that Lonnie Shield is in touch. Perfect Parking is the organization that manages our parking lot, and Lonnie is in contact with them. By the way, like, thank you. If anyone sees Lonnie Shield, Lonnie is our chair of buildings and grounds, and the work Lonnie does continually for our buildings and grounds is just absolutely incredible and just always above and beyond. And Lonnie is in fairly regular contact. Part of the $125,000 estimate in the budget is through contacts with Perfect Parking, saying this is what we're anticipating really being a sort of a reasonable conservative estimate. We had actually just renegotiated the contract up with Perfect Parking in March of last year when the pandemic hit, and then everything had to change. Part of the challenge with the courthouse is that even though the usage is on the rise, and this is where it kind of gets a little dicey for the future, and we really need to sort of figure it out, is during the pandemic, the courthouse had to learn how to have people testify virtually. And so now they have the capacity for people who used to have to come in, park, and go into the courthouse. Now, at least a certain percentage of those people, not jurors or things like that, but they can be online. And so we're really, you know, we really have to wait and see how much is going to come back. And so sort of the answer to the question is, yeah, Lonnie is keeping pretty good tabs on that. Part of what we really try to do on the income side is budget conservatively. You know, we don't, you know, we want to have it based in reality. And so what we asked Lonnie for was, you know, what is a conservative, reasonable estimate for parking income? And he said 125,000. And so, and that's a big ouch for this budget. I mean, I was really hoping we'd be back to 250. And, you know, that's the majority of our deficit right there. Says, how will we be able to fund the ideas for PACES improvements? Oh, that's right. It's Pat was writing on Marcia's thing. Pat Daw said, how will we be able to fund the ideas for PACES improvements that were described earlier? Terry, you want to talk about?
Are you looking at me? Yes. So I can't answer your question directly, Pat, but what I can tell you is that we have started, and I'm now agitating to pick up the pace about a conversation about bigger fundraising issues to sustain All Saints longer into its future. The PACES projects would be one. Some of you watching will remember that in the fall of 19, there were visuals out on the lawn on Sunday mornings and wonderful lively conversations about some of the physical plant changes that could be made, campus changes and upgrades and so forth. And we also want a bigger endowment. Our endowment is just barely over $1 million, which is kind of ridiculous for an organization this size and this vibrant. So it's a big conversation to have about those things. Fear not, we will move carefully and thoughtfully and involve all of you as we go along. But I would say that you can correct me if you'd like to, Mike, but I would say that the capital work that we've been talking about falls into that big conversation about what's possible, what is possible for us to do in respect to fundraising on the campus here, so, and from this community. So we have not lost sight of it. It just is, there's a bigger context for it at the moment.
The endowment piece is huge.
Mm-hmm.
And, my thought has always been that the ideal is that you have a big enough endowment to pay for all your facilities expenses, that the income from the endowment pays for all your facilities expenses, and then the community covers the program costs. Because what's happening all over churches, mainline Roman Catholic, synagogues, mosques, is these buildings that were built in the first half to the middle of the 20th century that were amazing. These buildings are deteriorating. And there's a whole category that Paces has of deferred maintenance on our buildings. And as congregation sizes shrink, as generationally fewer people are going to church, what is happening all over the country, and it's really happened in Canada and Europe, is the buildings just drag the churches under and they close. Now, we're nowhere near having that happen. We're in great shape, and we're the largest Episcopal church on the West Coast. There are about 16 Episcopal churches that are in the range of our size nationally, in this sort of size range, and also in sort of the budget range that we have. Of these 6 of at least 10 million, some have significantly more, except for us. And you heard Terry, it's like we've got like one. And so that's a significant change. He said, please repeat that. We're the largest Episcopal church on the West Coast. There's 16 churches. The church had an online tool that was able to make me figure this out really easily. There's 16 churches that are in sort of our size and budget range in the Episcopal church. We are one of the largest Episcopal churches. We are the only one that not only do we have the smallest endowment, all of them except for us have an endowment of at least $10 million. And so, we really need to look at, if we're looking at sustainability for All Saints Church long term, and it is why, something that you can do if you are making if you're doing your estate planning, please, please, please remember All Saints generously in your estate planning, because, down the road, that really is going to make a difference on the health and survival of All Saints Church. It absolutely is. So that's a whole other conversation. And but since it was brought up, seriously, one of the most wonderful things that you could do for All Saints Church long term is as generously as you can remember All Saints Church in your will, and hopefully that'll come to pass long after I'm gone here too. But it's something that as we do our estate planning that we're looking at. So please do that. Can a percent of realized planned gift be allocated to endowment? Did you get that, Terry?
I see the question.
I'm not sure what a realized planned gift is. Oh, wait, I think I know. Yeah, so like when it actually gets.
Do you mean right when the gift?
When we receive it? Yeah, we actually
sort
been
of
talking about
say
this.
Harvests in the business, right, Julianne? A gift can be currently, according to Federal Accounting Standards Board rules, the only way a gift can be allocated to endowment is by the donor. So we cannot make that decision for the donor. The rules change from time to time, and they have been different than this in the past, and they may change again in the future. But at the moment, the answer, I think, would be no.
Is this why we have something called quasi-endowment?
So quasi-endowment was created quite a long time ago. It's around $700,000 right now, and it is made up, I haven't been around long enough to swear on this, but I'm going to say largely of bequests that are not designated or restricted in any way. It is invested those funds are invested, and they are drawn on and spent only with a supermajority vote of the vestry.
Thank you. Excellent answers to these questions. Couple more. Oh, so first of all, Marshall steps in and says, when you make estate gifts to All Saints Church, please specify that the funds are to become part of the endowment. If that's what you want, please do that, because that's what you're saying. Yep. That needs to happen. Thank you. Janet Carroll Norton. Hey, Janet Carroll. Thank you so much for everything that you said on Sunday. That was just beautiful. Thank you. Where do weddings fit in? I think I touched on this earlier, that I think that's an underutilized income stream for us. And part of what we're trying to do is, I mean, it is wild how much money people spend on weddings. And All Saints is a gorgeous church. And that is really good potential income for us. And we're looking again at how we can maximize that. And also, you know, part of what that does is, I mean, there's building and grounds costs and that, which we would just, you know, you just bake into, you know, what you charge for that. So yeah, that's, I mean, it's something we're absolutely looking at. And part of what we're actually seeing right now is we're not seeing it right now in terms of actual a lot of weddings happening, although we're getting more. We're starting to get more and more weddings on the books because they've been postponed so many times from COVID. And a lot of people actually sort of went to adjust to the piece and got married. But then it's like, no, I still want my wedding in a church. And so we're seeing more of those. And two things are also happening. So here's the reality check with that. There was something in the New York Times this week about this, is that the percentage of people, I think, over 21 in this country who are married is about to drop under 50% for the first time in nation's history. So fewer people are getting married. And of the people that are getting married, a lot fewer of them are getting married in churches. And so it's not the potential income stream it used to be. And churches like All Saints, there's a lot of churches like won't do an interfaith wedding. Well, we do that. I did one this month. You know, a lot of churches still will not do same-sex weddings. Obviously, All Saints Church does that. And so, you know, weddings are great opportunities, not just for income, they're great opportunities for evangelism. And so that's something that we're definitely looking at. Nancy Mackey says, are any funds remaining from the pledges and donations given when Ed Bacon was rector for the major building and restoration plans? That would be from the last capital campaign. Terry, you want to talk about what is left and sort of what's going on with that?
Sure.
Great question, Nancy.
Sure. Yes, thanks for asking that, Nancy. So in round numbers, about $18.5 million was given or mostly pledged to that campaign. Of that 18.5 or so, about 11 was collected. And of that 11, 9 was spent on fees, consultant fees,
lawyers,
fees related to the city approval process, architect fees. So there is a balance of $2 million, which is currently in place. It is the Capital Campaign Finance Committee still exists. It is chaired by Gloria Pitzer. And funds were taken actually from that pool of money to construct the playground. It was only about $150,000, but that's where those funds were taken. And that Capital Campaign Advisory Committee needed to approve of that expenditure. So long story short, yes, there's about $2 million. There's about $2 million left.
Yeah, and the context is really important, and the process is important. So yeah, thank you. Jim White, here's my favorite wedding story. Years ago, the daughter of Sam Winston of Winston Tires fame got married at All Saints. They were not members of the parish. We charged them what was then the standard non-member fee, which was $2,500. They spent $60,000 on flowers. Need to revisit that policy if it's still in place. We are revisiting that policy. I have been to enough weddings where the reception is like literally $50,000 for the space, and the church gets $2,000, and it just is like, no. If you're going to spend this kind of money, you know, some of it needs to come our way, you know. So anyway, I agree with you. I agree with you, Jim. And it needs, and part of it is also, it's like, as everything, it needs to be a sliding scale, because we still need to be available to do weddings to people who don't have two nickels to rub together. You know, it's a sacrament of the church, and we need to do it for whomever. And if you're going to spend $60,000 on flowers, we should get more than 2,500. So anything else? Yeah, it's amazing.
I'd like
It's
to have seen
incredible.
those. They could have landscaped the whole place, right?
Yeah.
Probably.
Well, I got to tell you, I thought I went to some ritzy weddings when I lived in St. Louis. Ain't nothing compared to some of the stuff I've seen since I moved here to LA. Like, whoa, okay. So just great. Anything else? A few more minutes if needed. If not, people can go have your dinner or evening cocktail, cappuccino, or whatever. So, okay. Wait, there's just a thank you from Janet Carroll Norton. Well, thank you all. Thank you all, and thanks for coming. And we'll make sure the recording gets posted so people can see it. And just spread the word. And thank you for, again, your incredibly generous support of All Saints Church. Yes, financially, and in so many other ways. One of the things I love most about what happened in this pandemic is how you all reached out to each other and how you reached out to other people in the community. And that wasn't just sort of staff doing it. That was you all doing it. And it was just absolutely amazing. I'll close with one story that I told at staff meeting today, that 9 million things make my Sundays. I love Sundays at All Saints. A couple came up to me after the 11:30 service, and I recognized him. And it was a young man who he found All Saints Church. He's actually an incredible artist and musician. He found All Saints Church when he was experiencing homelessness. And it was right before the pandemic, but then really for about 3 months during the pandemic, he was, part of the crew that was living on our campus. And just a really amazing guy. He actually really helped sort of organize the community, did great work. And he came to church on Sunday morning, and he's living in San Diego, and he introduced us to his new fiance, and he's managing a Ralph's supermarket in San Diego. And he came back because he said he wanted to see if it was okay if he got married at All Saints Church, because he was so grateful. He said he had to show his fiance that this was the place when I had nowhere to go that I was able to stay. And it just is like, that's us. I know it's like I'm tearing up thinking, and it just is like, that's what we get to do. We get to be part of stories like that. And it's because of you all. I mean, it really is. It's because of you all. So sometime next spring, we're going to have a great wedding at All Saints Church. And it's going to be even better because of that story. So just so grateful that you all are part of a church that makes things like that happen. So have a great evening. Terry, Julianne, thank you so much, not just for being here tonight, but for all the work that you do. Love you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.